Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Veteran Voices in Code. I am here today with another alumni, Jose Delgado, talking about all sorts of interesting things. We might get into software engineering and how that meets up with the world of DevOps and all sorts of things. So, before we start, before we start with the more technical questions, Jose, I like to start with a traditional question now, which is, what made you raise your right hand? What made you say, "Yep, I want to go serve in the military"?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So my dad was a Marine. He was infantry for 8 years until he got out to take care of me, and from then on he worked in law enforcement as a U.S. Marshal, and then at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Brunswick, Georgia. So kind of from an early age, I wanted to kind of fill in his shoes and stuff, or do some kind of service, whether it be firefighter as a kid or what I ended up choosing, which was military. My college, or not my college, sorry, my high school had a great JROTC program, and I didn't want to do it at first. My parents were like, "Hey, listen, you like strictness, you like regiments, try it for 1 year, and then if you don't like it, you can do whatever you want." And I ended up loving it. Started sophomore year, went the rest of the 3 years, and was fortunate enough to earn the Navy ROTC scholarship to the Citadel. So that kind of solidified that, hey, you're definitely going to be serving from here on out. But always raised around it, and I was always loving it the moment I stepped foot in that JROTC classroom.
That's great. That's great. So join the Navy. What did you do in the Navy?
In the Navy, I was a Cryptologic Warfare Officer. I did signals intelligence and support to national operations.
Fantastic. And you may be aware or may not that we have a lot of overlap with people from similar backgrounds, linguistics, cryptological warfare, those kinds of things. There seems to be a gravitation towards Code Platoon. So draw that connection for me. You're getting out of the Navy, you decide, hey, I'm not gonna spend 25, 30 years in this. I want to get out. I want to go into draw that map out for me. How did you get here? How did you get to Code Platoon?
Yeah, so one of my tours was at the National Security Agency, and while there, unfortunately, obviously can't talk much about it, but
Sure.
I was able to dip my hands into tailored asset development, and I was like, you know what, this engineering thing is actually kind of cool. My degree's in it in computer science, so I'd already been exposed to it and had an idea of what I want to do. But at that point, I was still looking career. But kind of as I just aged up, I was like, am I going to do Navy for 20 years? I'm hitting the 6 year mark, or am I going to get out and, before I hit 30, start a new career field and go forward? So, uh, thinking back, I really did enjoy my work with the NSA. So I figured, hey, I'd like to have a job, one, that I could talk about, and two, that revolves around software engineering. So, while I was on deployment in 2022. I mean, you're helping me out while I was over in Greece, taking my
Yeah.
calls with horrible reception, everything. Um, I applied for Code Platoon. I pulled the trigger, said, "Hey, I want to get ready to get out." And yeah, the rest is history. February, I started my Skillbridge, and then followed it into terminal leave, and thankfully gainful employment at my current employer.
Great. So there's two subjects there that I think that are worth exploring because we have a lot of people in a similar situation now or coming in the future. So there's a couple of things there. First, let's hit on the skill bridge topic real quick. What for future students, skill bridge? You're telling somebody now who's thinking about skill bridge, what's your 30-second elevator speech on I wish I had known to help their process be better in the future?
Yeah, so Skillbridge, DoD supported program that allows veterans to transition successfully into the civilian world and get gainful employment. My wish I had known is that I had known about it in general. It's probably the DoD's best kept secret. I
Agreed.
didn't know about it until the signals warfare officer that I was replacing was leaving, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm taking Skillbridge," and I immediately went, "What is that?" And he told me about it, and I guess that's a little step in the catalyst of, I should keep that in the back of my mind for when I'm getting
Right.
out, and he actually helped me out through it. But yeah, it's honestly, after you take in the Navy, it's called TAPS, your Transition Assistance Program. This is Skillbridge is absolutely phenomenal. Puts you in contact with people and places, and it's just phenomenal. Gets you skills that you originally didn't have that you want to go into.
I
Couldn't
agree.
recommend it enough.
I
Talk to your
agree. And
E7s and talk to your officers. Get that stuff going if you are thinking about getting out.
Agreed. And if you're coming across this video sometime in the future, you've already done it or something like that, please share it with others who are not yet out. Because one of the biggest problems with Skillbridge, you already noted, is just knowing about it, knowing that it exists, knowing that that's a potential. I got out in 2009. I don't think it existed then, but if it did, I certainly didn't know about it. So it wasn't until I came to Code Platoon that I knew about it at all. Another subject you touched on there, and this is a big one that we get. So I'm curious as to your thoughts. You said you already had a degree in computer science. Tell me, what's the advantage of each? So obviously you've already got a computer science background. You come to Code Platoon. What do you see of the, and try, I'm not looking for a hit piece on computer science degree programs. So what's the upside of each one of those, and what do you see the advantages, maybe disadvantages of each one being?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start off with if you go in with a degree, since that's what I'm familiar with. So you go in with a degree, you're already going you should have a foundation in software and how computers work, right? So when we talk about stuff like literals, strings, booleans, all that stuff, typing, object orientation, all that jazz. Someone coming in from the outside does not have exposure, might get confused by a lot of the concepts starting out, but at least having been exposed to it previously, not even with a degree, just having previous exposure, you already have some sort of familiarity. So even if you don't completely understand it, you have the capability to attribute concepts to each other and kind of conceptualize information that way. If you're coming in without a degree, that's kind of why I like Skillbridge, Code Platoon specific. You're a lot more reliant on the professor or on the instructors and your colleagues, but at the same time, you're more of a sponge. If you get exposed to so much material, maybe you had a degree, you have a degree, and you kind of, I don't know, maybe you learned incorrectly, or you had poor experiences for actual software implementation after you got your degree, and then you decided to take Skillbridge and Code Platoon and all that. Um, it can cause, I guess you call it mental conflict. There's a
Sure.
better term I know, but learning conflict, just the information you already have doesn't match up with what you're learning, and it causes an innate sense of confusion on, okay, have I been doing things right? Are they teaching me wrong? And it's that confidence. It can be debilitating to your confidence.
Sure.
Um,
Sure. Yeah, I think cognitive dissonance is maybe the term you're looking for there. It's
yes,
a com
thank you. That was
common
definitely
common term that's thrown out that's often misunderstood. And for those curious, cognitive dissonance is actually a good thing. It's actually a positive thing. A lot of people see it as a bad thing, but it's actually how we learn. We come across two conflicting pieces of information that creates cognitive dissonance. It's that discomfort that we try to reconcile. That's where we learn. That's where we learn the most. So I think it's a good thing. Now, I've heard conflicting things on this subject, so I'm curious as to your take. Some who have had a computer science degree came through our program, and they've noted that what Code Platoon provided for them was a lot more practical, hands-on application of the learning, rather than simply just the theoretical model building, something like that. Was that your experience? Is that accurate, inaccurate, needs caveats?
to an extent, I'd probably agree with that sentiment. Code Platoon definitely hands on. I I guess I'd be a little biased because since I already knew some of the background of, I don't know, the accessibility of the information, to say whether or not it truly helped in any significant capacity. But yeah, I do believe Code Platoon focuses more on the practical sense. With that being said, though, a lot of the instructors did focus on a lot of the basic level conceptual information. So again, object oriented orientation structures, and you're dealing with multiple languages: JavaScript, TypeScript, Python. While you don't get into any low-level languages, they're samey enough to where you can pick them up and kind of say, okay, this is similar. Here's how I go. But they're different enough to where you're going to have to learn two different structures for different languages and their implementations. So I don't consider that a negative on Code Platoon for being more of a practical sense. I think it's
Right.
actually more important because then any questions you have, I mean, while you're in your Skillbridge program, you have the entirety of the internet to say, hey, why does this work like something that your instructor can't cover? Or if you're or during TA hours, you can go ahead and get that answered and just start asking questions.
Absolutely. And I've maintained that for quite some time now since I've been part of Code Platoon is that, by no means are we disparaging of the degree pathway or that as a model. But in terms of starting your career and having that hands-on application knowledge, I think, this is a very solid method of learning what you need to do to be a junior software engineer. So moving forward, you've been out now a couple of years. You've been out of Code Platoon, what, 2 years now? What did you start out? Just one. Okay. Couldn't remember exactly. So what did you start out doing? Is it the same thing you're doing now, or have you transitioned into something else?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to interview with my current company about a month after Code Platoon concluded, and I was actually able to get employment with them, and I'm still with them to this day. So that was, again, I feel like I was extremely fortunate in that fact. I know a couple friends who went through and it took till around the 6 month mark, not to their fault, but it's just kind
It can
of job
happen.
market fluctuates. Yeah, it does happen.
No, absolutely. So what was your starting role, and just give us kind of the elevator speech version of what you're doing now and how that's like I said, just a synopsis of what you're doing now, I guess.
Yeah, so I started out as an associate engineer on the cloud engineering team at my company. And basically, my job was to start working on cloud infrastructure for DoD customers that we had contracts with. As time progressed, I was able to get certifications and learn enough to become a software engineer and be put with the software engineer team itself, which was essentially now instead of just focusing on cloud infrastructure, I'm creating full stack solutions for for a customer depending on what they want in their enclaves. I'm using very generic terms,
Yeah.
um, proprietary information, all that
Oh
stuff.
no, that's
So,
fine.
but in a sense, I'm just I'm helping customers take what they want or describe what they want, put it into requests, and then from there create a solution that will work in whatever environment they're in, whether it's classified, unclassified, federal, what have you. So a lot of
Understood.
fun. I love it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. And that's exactly what we want to hear from people. They made the right choice to do this. So what you're talking about there, I think speaks to kind of what you and I started this conversation with on Slack. We all A year and a half ago, we started a DevOps program. There is a lot of questions out there on what is the difference between DevOps, cloud engineering, software engineering. You started obviously as a software engineer, but what you're doing kind of butts up against that world of cloud engineering, DevOps. Give us the kind of the synopsis of what you would say to someone who says, well, what's the difference? What is a DevOps engineer versus a software engineer? What's your take on that?
So, excuse me. Ooh. So software engineer, you can really think of as boots on the ground. You're the technician, you're engineering, you're creating the solutions, you're working on what's given to you. Where DevOps engineer is still doing the technical work. However, now their focus is split between strictly technical and also dealing with management teams. So contracts, operations, maybe customers. As an engineer, like even right now, I'm not like I'm gearing up. We call them senior software engineers, not necessarily DevOps, but they do everything. But the senior software engineer encapsulates everything that a DevOps engineer would do. And that's basically, as a software engineer, I want to be told, hey, here's the solution. Maybe I'm working with my team saying, how should we best tailor it? What language should we work? What framework should we employ? That's what I want to focus on. But as a DevOps engineer or a senior engineer, I want to be able to help out where I can on the technical side, but I want to make sure that all my software engineers have the tools information they need to keep progressing their work. And that's where the software development life cycle comes in, and agile methodologies and scrumming, all that stuff. That's where that stuff starts to play. It's in that DevOps side. And you can employ that at the lower level with software engineering with maybe a localized, hey, here's the tickets I'm working on. Here's how I'm going to format my time. But it really shines when you're an engineer managing engineers, and you're kind of in charge to make sure everything's running smoothly.
No, that makes sense. So I'm going to throw an analogy at you because I like to put things in the context of people's backgrounds as much as possible because I think That's where I come in at Code Platoon. I'm not a software engineer. I'm not a DevOps engineer. I'm a recruiter, right? So I have to kind of bridge that gap. And so obviously we're dealing with almost exclusively military community. Here's the analogy I sometimes use, and I want you to tell me where I'm wrong and how this is inaccurate, or maybe it is accurate. In the military, right, we've got new products, new gear that we use. You were in the Navy, so let's assume that the Navy needs a new version of an F-18, right? We'll use a Top Gun analogy because that's a cool movie. Why not? Right? So they need a new F-18. They're going to go to McDonnell Douglas and say, hey, we need a new plane. And the engineers are going to start building that plane and designing that plane. But somebody has to bring that plane to the Navy pilots and say, all right, fly this thing and tell me what's wrong. And I'll go back and talk to the engineers about what is wrong and we can make it better. Is that an accurate analogy of what a DevOps engineer essentially is?
Yeah, essentially. You also captured in there essentially what your management and contracts are going to be working with. And when they go to the Navy, say, hey, what kind of plane do you want? How fast should it fly? What capabilities should it have? And then they're going to communicate, those admin teams are going to communicate with your DevOps engineers and your lead engineers, say, hey, here's what's being solicited. What do you see anything wrong here? And they're going to turn those requirements into actionable tickets or workflows for the engineers to actually do. So yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head.
That's great. So it's good to hear because I don't want to be feeding people inaccurate information. But in that context and kind of making that same analogy, that DevOps person has to have an understanding of both worlds. And I think that's important for people to understand who are maybe outside and trying to think about how to get into this field is that you can't just be a pure engineer and you can't just be a pure, work with a client type person. You kind of have to have the ability to do both. Is that an accurate take on that?
If you're DevSecOps, I would say yes. Because again, if you don't have people skills and you're not willing to learn it, I mean, you can be a great engineer then. But when you're DevSec, you gotta be able to talk with the customer. You have to be able to, in a tactful manner, tell them, hey, this is a poor decision. Here are the reasons why. However, here's what your end goal is. So here's what my recommendation is. With the knowledge of, hey, if the customer wants to spend the money and still have it done anyways, it's all right. Well, it's going to be frustrating, but I'll turn it into a workflow. So,
right. And it's
welcome to DevSec.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's important to note too, for anybody who stumbles upon this conversation or is listening, to understand that what we're talking about here may vary from company to company, as I understand it, because you might get a different answer with somebody who works in this in a different area of the industry, right? So don't just take one definition. I learned this early on at Code Platoon. There are people who will swear up and down that a software engineer and a software developer are the exact same thing. And there are people out there who will say, no, these are different roles. So, always take this into consideration that you might have different definitions that vary a bit from place to place. So, along that note, and now we're diving more into the eminently practical aspect of that. DevOps, is that a place then, given all of what we said so far, is DevOps even a good place to start a career, or should it be started at the software engineering? Is that a better kind of a training ground, as it were, to become into that world of DevOps rather than just saying, I'm going to start out as DevOps because that seems like it fits me? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Honestly, it's a really weird answer. The answer is maybe, and I hate using no, yes, or no's, but the reason is because no matter what, you're gonna be learning some other a different side entirely, anyways. If you start out as a software engineer, you're gonna have to learn how to interface with customers if you want to go to DevSec, and vice versa. Maybe you were a project manager and you want to be a DevSec engineer, right? You're going to have to learn software so that you can communicate with your engineers and the engineering team. So regardless, I don't think the question is, or I don't think the answer should be tailored as, yes, it's an easy start because you have to know, or no, it's not an easy start because you have to know both. It's, can you learn a completely different field that will relate to your current job or your current job interest? And that's really going to determine how easy it is to start out as a DevSecOps engineer. If you're an I don't know, like in the Navy, if you're an FCA chief, you've been managing Aegis weapon systems, right?
Yep.
If you end up getting out, you work with a subcontractor that works with DoD companies. You bring all that information on the capabilities of Aegis, and while you don't know software engineering, you can speak to DoD customers that probably DON, Department of the Navy, and solicit their requests, and then work with a senior engineer and say, hey, how do I get this turned into actual items that your team can use? And that's DevSecOps. Like, as long as you're being that interconnecting point, that's DevSec. That's under the umbrella. So, like, to kind of summarize, depending on your background, it can be either very easy or very difficult to be a DevSec engineer, but you don't necessarily need to have exposure to both sides to be a good DevSec engineer.
Fair, fair. No, I think that was a good summary. And I, of course, I asked this because a lot of people are asking these questions. Where do I best fit and things like that. And here again, there seems to be some varied answers depending on who you talk to. But I think that was a rather robust answer. So connected to that, although maybe not directly, but a popular topic on everyone's mind right now, AI development. First of all, how does it impact you in what you're doing right now? And second, tie in the question of the famous phrase, it's taking our jobs, or it's taking the jobs of software engineers. What are you seeing and how it relates to exactly what you've been talking about? And what do you see this moving forward in terms of job opportunities and the reality of this market?
Yeah, so there's actually a fun reflection moment because about a year ago I did a coding podcast where I believe I was like, I don't like AI, I'm not going to use it in my repo. Jump cut in a year. I'm older, I'm more mature, I've learned so much in the world. I love it. I think AI is a phenomenal tool. I still stand by that you can tell someone who uses AI as a tool versus a crutch. That difference being, if I don't know, maybe your network goes down, but you still have your IDE up, can you still bang out some code? Can you still at least write a boilerplate method? Do you understand what it does? If so, cool, use AI to your heart's content, but you need to remember your fundamentals so you can explain it to either the younger engineers coming up or to an executive that's going down. That's a little beside the point. When it comes to AI, I've been loving to see it expand. Our companies embraced AI. They actually encourage us to use it um, to have impact on our workflow. To tell them, hey, does it speed up? Does it slow down? I've used it personally on like creating quick study guides on new frameworks I'm learning or new languages, even some deprecated ones I'm trying to do because shout out to the DoD, right? Um, it's been phenomenal instead of Googling around, running through Stack Overflow forums and pulling all that together. Uh, it, it it aggregates it for you. So I don't take it at face value. I don't use it as a fully cited search. I use it as a launching point for whatever I'm trying to go down. Do I think it will replace jobs? Currently, no. I've seen the code it spits out. Unless you're very, very, very specific, cool. It can create an HTML web page. It, it can give you some components to React. It currently cannot do the integration piece for it. It can't build out an entire full stack web application with consideration to environmental constraints. Maybe you're in a CUI environment, and so you can't use certain libraries. You can't use open source libraries, maybe. Maybe you're in a classified environment. You can't use libraries in general. There's a lot of, or like external libraries in general. So it's not good for very specific use cases like that. But I don't know if you've seen Philip DeFranco on YouTube. That's where I get my daily source of news. He says it whenever he covers AI. He says it the best that anyone could ever say it, and that's AI today is as bad as it will ever be. It's going to get better.
Sure.
That's just technological progress.
Sure.
But I think it's best used when side by side with a person who can determine the nuances of the human thought, human characteristics.
Fair point. Fair point. So again, I like to, I'll use another military analogy, but I'll draw on my background this time. And I was an infantryman to start out with, but I can tell, I tell everybody all the time, and it's not really joking. I qualified expert with a mop and a broom way before I was an expert with a rifle, right? I spent so much time mopping and cleaning because that's what the infantry does. Like everything's clean and perfect, right? It has to be. My perspective is what you're saying here about AI is that it kind of is like taking the mop and the broom away from the infantryman. He still has the core job of being an infantryman. He's still got to put heavy weight on his back and march to the objective and, conquer the objective. But now he's not cleaning the barracks as much because the broom and the mop is taken by a robot. Is that is that a fair analogy or not quite?
I'd say more if you're infantryman, you have an M4 and you have a red dot sight on it. Can you fire with a red dot sight? Yes. Does it make your life easier? Does it make hitting the target harder or easier? Yes. But if your red dot sight breaks, can you still operate your weapon? Can you still use good old iron sights and hit a target 40 yards out? Yes. Then you're fine. I can AI to the red dot sight.
Okay.
Eventually, maybe it'll be a sea whiz, and I'll just see something, and technology progresses, but that's up to the engineers and the companies to progress with it and see how they can integrate it and use it to boost themselves.
No, that's fair. It's fair. So, right now, and I think that's an apt way of looking at things. An apt analogy is that it's a tool, right? It's an enhancing tool more so than a replacing tool. But as you said, its worst is today, and it's going to get better and better and better. What fast forward 5 years? Just your speculative take on it. What are we seeing 5 years from now?
Um, I know at the very least, probably an expectation on stuff like GitHub Copilot integration onto your IDEs, right? If you don't know what that is, basically it helps you fill in reusable or frequently used code snippets. So instead of using an entire for loop constantly, it will probably autofill it based on the context of your application. Um, it's I think that would probably end up being the bare minimum of understanding what to do or how to use things. And probably in 5 years, you're going to see more of a shift in expectations from executive to senior level management versus engineers using AI. Especially as AI becomes more robust, this gives companies just the capability of, hey, now our engineers can learn XYZ frameworks, which is maybe it's the newest web app framework or newest database querying language. They can use ChatGPT 5.0 at this point, and learn how to do it real quick. So I want you, team lead, to create a test implementation. Let us know or talk to management and see what other data you can use to manage maybe our financials, and deliver me a database that allows me to pull our financials within, I don't know, 1 second refresh rate or something like that. Like it just gives the flexibility with the asterisk of don't overstress your engineers with a bunch of
Sure,
new stuff because you think it's a good idea.
sure.
But that's kind of where I think AI. I don't think AI will be too different. I just think it'll be more integrated.
Mm. No, that makes sense. And probably into a lot more areas of life, just like computers became. I mean, I'm a kid of the 70s and the 80s, and I can tell you, like computers were kind of a novelty back in the 80s. It was like, oh yeah, cool, you have a computer, so what? And now it's everything. It's everything that we do. So backing out now, since we only have about 9 minutes left. We're going to back out a little bit bigger picture. You meet somebody who's considering Code Platoon. You're talking to somebody right now who's considering this future. What do you tell them? What's your elevator pitch on what to do, things to consider? What do you say to that person?
Talk with your command, get your ducks in a row, and go do it. Like genuinely, I genuinely loved it. I found it probably one of the most useful just courses I've ever taken ever. Instructors are great, very hands-on, very approachable. TAs are usually alumni or full-time, and their time is absolutely incredible. Like they're incredible to utilize as a resource for, hey, I don't understand why something works, even after we went over it for 9 hours. All of them are very smart, all of them very passionate. Most of them are already employed and have been in the software engineering field for years, so they have practical experience to fall back on. And you don't even have to ask them just about the course. You can ask them about job market or, hey, what'd you do to start out? There's such a wealth of knowledge going through Code Platoon that if you're even remotely interested in a software engineering or full stack engineering prospect or prospect for your future, you would be doing yourself a disservice by not doing it.
It's fascinating to me looking at it kind of, from the front end of this organization. I've asked now, I don't know how many people I've asked who are graduates of Code Platoon that same question, and how many times and how common the two words "do it" come up in that in that answer. Like it is universal. Everyone I've asked has said, now they have a little bit longer answer, just like you did, but the preface of that answer is always do it. Like, just do it. And so it makes me proud as a member of the organization to hear that from everybody I've talked to going through coming through the program, and to reflect back on the instructors as well. And everyone comments on the professionalism of the instructors, which is super great to hear. It just, like I said, it makes me proud. So transitioning totally less serious, because we've only got a couple minutes left. I asked two questions of everybody. First question is, do you listen to music when you're working? And if so, what do you listen to?
It's either music or a podcast. If it's music, I listen to a lot of indie music, indie pop, or it's video game metal music. I found it on deployment, helped me work out, and it's just a bunch of video game background music with
Okay.
metal covers on top. Love it to bits. Podcast, I listen to Darknet Diaries with Jack Resider. Have to, I'm a nerd. And I listen to Creepcasts, which is two YouTubers who talk about like horror stories and creepypastas from the internet, and love them all.
Fantastic. There's a common theme, and I asked this question because the first episode we did of this was with former musicians turned software engineers. So people who were actual military band members and then became software engineers, because we've had a lot of people, I don't know if you know that or not, but we've had a number of people come through from military bands, like Navy band, Army band. Like, it's crazy disproportionate because they don't make up a huge portion of the military, but we've had a lot of them come through. None of them listen to music while they work. None, because it's too distracting. So
nope. I need something. I need something to clear out the rings or just to keep my mind moving.
Right. So final question, even, probably even less serious. Favorite movie and or show from the last 2 years?
Favorite show has to be Righteous Gemstones. Phenomenal, hilarious. It's fairly dry humor, but I've been binging it the past couple weeks. All right, to season 3. I actually also fell into Dexter. From 2005. I just started watching it, and I know my mom used to love it.
Classic.
She recorded on her TiVo and all that stuff. That and Charmed all the time. So I found out on Netflix. I was like, I'll give it a watch. I'm actually really enjoying that one too. So I think those two. Favorite movie would be the new Deadpool movie. Genuinely laughed my butt off. Zero complaints. Enjoyed every second of it. And I hate superhero movies with a passion. So take that for what you will.
I hear very good things. I haven't seen it yet, but I hear very good things about it. I'm sure that I will. It takes a lot to get me to the theater, so I'm sure I'll see it. It's streaming, but
this is a good recommendation. That, and I want to see Twisters really badly because I've always had a fascination with tornadoes.
We will end up, I personally, in my house, we will end up owning that one because my wife is a huge disaster movie fan, and she has watched the original Twisters no less than 100 times, so she can quote it verbatim. So I promise you that I'll end up owning that via Amazon as soon as it's available. It'll be in our catalog for sure. Any final thoughts that you have in our remaining 4 minutes?
I guess my only final thought is do it. Stop thinking about it and just do it. Whether it's Code Platoon or engineering, the more you think about it, the more you're going to make yourself nervous. Just pull the trigger, get going. You don't quit or you don't fail. You don't fail because you don't succeed in what you want. You fail because you quit. So get out there, don't fail.
That's a great way of putting it. I wholeheartedly agree with all the people I've seen come through Code Platoon. If you want it, you'll do it. And yeah, and the support is there for you. If you want to do this, the support is there to help make it happen. Well, Jose, it was great to talk to you again. I know that it's been a little while since we chatted, so it was great to get back in touch with you. It's always good to see alumni who are doing well and excited about what they're doing. And I am greatly appreciative of your willingness to jump on here and have a conversation about this stuff, because a lot of it is, these are questions that people have. These are genuine questions that I can't answer fully because I don't do it. And so I love having the opportunity to talk to people in your position who can speak to the experiential aspect of it, which I think is huge. So I am very grateful for you being on this with me and doing this program. If somebody wants to talk to Jose more, get in touch with me. I'm not going to hand out his email to everybody, but if you email me, greg@codeplatoon.org, and you're serious and you have some legit questions for Jose, I'll put you in touch. Absolutely. And we'll make that happen. But Jose, again, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And this has been another episode of Veteran Voices in Code. I'm your host, Greg Drobny, at the recruiter at Code Platoon. Again, you can email me, greg@codeplatoon.org, or if you email the info@codeplatoon.org email, it'll come to me as well. So I look forward to hearing from anyone out there who wants to know more. I'm happy to talk about exactly that. So thanks for joining us today, Jose. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon, I hope.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg.
Thank you.